Potato Diary, the first official episode of 2023. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for liking, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and also leave a comment. If you are listening in podcast form, remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you possibly can. Coming up on the show today, we run through the NFL. It is our final stupid good fantasy football team of the week. We are looking at the OG Anunoby trade as the Raptors make a gigantic move with the New York Knickerbockers. And we also get into a little bit of the World Juniors. I was on Game Over Juniors 2024 today over on SDPN, breaking down Canada's heartbreaking loss to Czechia. So check that video out now. But we'll get into a little bit more big picture-y stuff here as this show rolls on. You can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/primetimepk, and you can email this show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. All right, let's get into it and talk some football. So the NFL is winding down and the Baltimore Ravens are heating up. The Ravens made a statement this weekend with a dominant win over the Miami Dolphins. And there is obviously a lot to dissect from this one. But I think the first and foremost is what a performance from the Baltimore Ravens. Just absolute dominance. And again, this offense is showing that they can score on anybody. And the defense is showing it's tough to score on them. This is such a complete team. And I have said for a while that this is the most complete team in the AFC. This might be the most complete team in the NFL. I still think that's the 49ers, but this Ravens team is putting up amazing showing after amazing showing, and it has been just an absolute treat to watch what they have done. So I have really enjoyed what I've seen from the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson, there's still a couple throws you wish he would make every now and then, but I mean, You take the bad to get to the elite. He is probably the MVP. I still kind of think it should be Christian McCaffrey, but look, Lamar Jackson is playing out of his mind football right now. The last frontier for Lamar Jackson, and the one that kind of makes everyone just like, okay, just take a breath, take a deep breath, just the last thing for Lamar Jackson, can he do it in the postseason? Because we know he's done it. He's been an MVP before. He has lit up the NFL in the regular season. Now it is time to see what this particular player can do when you get to the postseason. I will be so interested to see what they do in the second round as they wrap up the top spot in the AFC this week. On the Dolphins side of things, it is concerning how many good teams they've lost to this year, and like all of their stats they're putting up against bad teams. Excuse me, like that is obviously a concern for this Miami team. I still think they are a good football team. I would favor them to beat the Buffalo Bills this weekend, but you have to have some major concerns about Miami, especially if they don't win that game against Buffalo and they have to go out on the road. That home field advantage in Miami is huge for them, especially this time of year. Yeah, that's going to be a monumental task for this Miami team to have to go. You go from playing one, maybe two home games to none. That's quite the drop. And so Miami, this is a monster game coming up for them this weekend. The team they'll be facing is the Buffalo Bills. That is the Sunday primetime game. And this was a bit of a humbling performance for Buffalo in a loss. And a lot of times Buffalo's been humbled a humbling performance for Buffalo in a win. A lot of times they have been humbled in losses before. But this was one where like they should have gone in and kicked the crap out of the Patriots. But New England was able to keep it close against Buffalo. And this is a Bills squad that like they have been riding high the last couple of weeks. I do think you have to look at this now as a bit of a learning, like, hey, just a reminder, there's still a couple of holes in this thing. And they like, again, you come away with a win, so that's a good way to learn and win at the same time. But Buffalo, I really do think they need to mind their business going up against Miami coming up this weekend. A bit of a same thing for the LA Rams. I thought they would light up the New York Giants defense, and it looked like they were kind of setting up to. But then the Giants make this one a very close game late. And there are concerns around the defense, I think, for the LA Rams, and the offense isn't perfect. But I mean, like they get potentially get the Detroit Lions in the first round of the playoffs. That'd be a real interesting matchup for those of us who maybe aren't as on the Lions bandwagon as others are. I think the Rams would be a trendy upset play throughout the week, but like the defense still needs to come up with a few stops. And the Lions, we're not going to get them on here, but the Lions offense is playing much better than they were even a couple of weeks ago. Just an awful loss for the Philadelphia Eagles this week. That was dreadful. That is like some of the other losses. You didn't like how lopsided they were, but you can kind of, okay, well, it's a good San Francisco team. Buffalo's playing well, you know. Dallas is pretty good, but there's no explaining away that Arizona loss. And look, does it hurt deeply that it costs me our Arizona under 3.5 wins play? Yes, it does. It's insulting, and I'll never cheer for the Eagles again. But I also got a James Conner touchdown that helped me win a third place game in fantasy this week, so I'm not going to be too upset. But I think you do have to look at coaching now in Philadelphia. Like this thing has been off the rails for a little bit, and it seems like the adjustments have been, I don't know, we'll figure it out. Defensively, this team isn't good. And that is a huge step back from where they were a season ago. And offensively, they've taken a step back. And obviously, like, they lost their play caller, so that was always going to be a bit of a challenge. But man, I think a lot of this falls on Nick Sirianni. And the cocky, come at us, all that stuff is great when you're winning. But when you've lost like 5 in a row, it tends to ring a little bit hollow. And so this is now where he needs to be a leader of this football team and get this team back on track as they now potentially and probably head out on the road for the postseason. The Pittsburgh Steelers offense, I am kind of buying what's being sold here as the Steelers make a push towards the playoffs. They're going to need some help. But you can very clearly see how not it Kenny Pickett is when Mason Rudolph is going out there and lighting things up. It makes for an interesting discussion around the quarterback position for the Pittsburgh Steelers this upcoming season. They did a great job of getting the offensive coordinator out who was the problem. And you can see it's something we've been harping on all year. Pittsburgh's got the talent everywhere, just not at the quarterback position. So we'll see in a quarterback heavy draft and a quarterback free agency, but with a few guys who can fill some gaps anyway. We'll see what the Pittsburgh Steelers are able to do at the quarterback spot. The Kansas City Chiefs get a win that they desperately need with a victory over the Cincinnati Bengals. It wasn't perfect. It doesn't answer a whole lot of the questions, but like they needed that win in just the worst way, with Denver and Vegas to a lesser extent kind of breathing down their necks. This was a win the Kansas City Chiefs absolutely needed, and they absolutely got it. Now, they are going to have to play road playoff games probably for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' career, but they are setting themselves up here to at least feel a little bit better going into the postseason, and we'll see if they can unlock Travis Kelce a little bit more. Lastly, the Green Bay Packers get a game that they needed on Sunday night, and they're now in a win and you're in situation this week. We have talked about for a bit how much we like the weapons on this team, how much we like the development of what's going on in Green Bay. This is a win you can build on, and I think this is absolutely a season you can build on. Defense needs to be the focus of the draft, but there is a lot to be really excited about in Green Bay this season. And there's a lot to be excited about for a football fan. I think there's only 3 or 4 games that don't have playoff implications this week. It's going to be a blast. So I can't wait to break it all down throughout the week. We're going to change things up a little bit. Tomorrow is going to be the final NFL power rankings for the season. We're going to do that coming up on Wednesday. And then Friday we are going to have, I guess it's not going to be our final. It's going to be the final, the penultimate power rankings for the season. Next week we'll probably do them as well, getting ready for the NFL playoffs. And then the preview shows on Fridays will continue as always. But yeah, that is what's coming up NFL-wise here throughout the next couple of weeks. Now, one thing we've been doing, this is the final one for this. The stupid good fantasy football team, the shitty fantasy football team that could have beat yours. Fantasy football can be a cruel, cruel thing. Although, happy to say, did win a championship in fantasy football this year. Had three podium finishes, I guess you could say, for fantasy football in the 6 leagues that I am in. So, hooray. But each week we want to show how difficult this thing can be and how just sometimes it's just random. So we look at the top performance. I say we, it's me. I look at the top performances of the players who are owned the least across fantasy football to see just how stupid a good fantasy football team could be. At the quarterback position, we start with Aiden O'Connell, just 5% owned. The Raider quarterback, 20.26 fantasy points this week. Darius Slayton is our wide receiver. He is 3% owned, 16.6 fantasy points. Our other wide receiver, Bo Melton, who was appropriately 0% owned, 16.5 fantasy points. At running back, you know these names a little bit. Justice Hill from Baltimore, 19% owned, 17.2 fantasy points. Elijah Mitchell, 13% owned, 14 fantasy points. At tight end, it's Juwan Johnson, someone who was a waiver wire pickup for us a few weeks ago. He 15% owned, 15 fantasy points. At our flex spot, Julio Jones, just 1% owned, but he comes up in championship week with 15.4 fantasy points. The New York Giants defense, not something you would expect. They are 2% owned, that you'd expect. 16 fantasy points. That's not what you were expecting. And our kicker is Kaimi Fairbairn. He was 7% owned. He was a top 3 kicker on the week with 16 fantasy points. This team, with leaders like Justice Hill and Juwan Johnson as your top owned players, came up with 146 fantasy points on championship weekend. Fantasy football is such a cruel industry. All right, big trade happened over the weekend. Let's talk about it in basketball. So, OG Anunoby is moved from the Toronto Raptors to the New York Knicks. Obviously, my focus, you can see Kawhi behind me, is going to be on the Toronto Raptors. I like this trade a lot from a Toronto perspective. RJ Barrett almost feels like a bit of a buy low candidate. It feels like they had kind of whatever they were going to get out of RJ in New York, they already got. And so if RJ was going to find another level, and kind of the level that would justify a number 3 pick, he's going to it would have to be in a different spot. And so it's now in a different spot, and it's a spot he's very comfortable with. He talked about growing up a Raptor fan, talked about the importance of basketball in this country, represented his country at the World Cup this last offseason. He is someone who gets it and gets how important this team and this situation is. And so if he is going to elevate his game, this makes a ton of sense for Toronto to bring him in. Quickly is, I think, going to be the headliner for a lot of basketball people. Exciting young player, 24, 25 years old. The issue is he wants to get paid. And the Raptors, I think, are still in a bit of a rebuild situation. Is quickly a guy you build around. I think the Raptors are going to give him every opportunity to earn whatever contract he wants over the next 50, 60 games. But it's the type of player that you think fits with Scottie Barnes immediately. It was the type of player that the Knicks just were hesitant to throw into various trades for star players. But now he gets a fresh start in Toronto, and I think a situation that he works really well in. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned with from a Toronto standpoint is a couple of years ago, this was a team that got the most out of a lot of players. They haven't really done that in the last little bit. They've kind of got the least out of a lot of guys. And so this is now a real important time for Toronto to maximize these minutes and see if this can be the growth and development team that they were 5 years ago or so. On the OG Anunoby side of this, from a Toronto standpoint, you hate to see him leave. He was a guy, he was the type of player that the Raptors had been looking for forever. Nice, like, to say 3-and-D, I think limits what he can actually do a little bit, but yeah, just the exact type of player that this organization has been looking for a very, very long time. He played exactly how he needed to. He grew with this organization and is someone who can really set an attitude and a culture on the court. And so that's what you're getting out with the Knicks. This does make them better. I think it raises the floor more than it raises the ceiling for this team. And I think Toronto kind of does the same, quite honestly, just with the depth issues that they have. But like, I don't think this puts New York in a tier with Boston or Milwaukee or anything like that. And they gave away like one of the pretty big assets they had to trade in Emmanuel Quickly. They still have some picks that they can move if they want to go out and make a big time splash. And OG is an expiring contract. Maybe they flip him again. But this is a real interesting player to play with Brunson, but I think especially he's a real interesting guy to go with Coach Tibbs. I think that this is like a hard-nosed defensive coach is going to love everything that OG Anunoby provides. You can throw him out there against the other team's best player. He's guarded Giannis and done okay. He's guarded Jokic for stretches and not been eaten alive. He's a really, really interesting player for Tom Thibodeau. So I think this is going to be a fun mix to see what he does out in New York. From a Raptor standpoint, what's next? I feel like this does mean Siakam. I don't think it means Siakam immediately. I think they're going to want to see what this group can do. And I think they look at the future right now as Barrett, Barnes, and Quickly. So a nice BBQ. We will see if Pascal Siakam gets thrown into that as well, or if he is another trade. The one thing from a Raptor standpoint you wish there would have been a bit more of is draft capital, but I like that they got a couple of younger-ish players anyway, instead of going for draft capital in what is, as of right now, considered a bit of a skimpy draft. So that's it from the Raptors side of things. They come away, like, they lost to the Pistons. We all kind of figured that was coming, honestly, given how this season has gone. But they came out with a nice win against Cleveland the other night, so we'll see how this team kind of meshes together as the season rolls on. Let's wrap up with a couple of quick thoughts on hockey. Team Canada is done at the World Junior Hockey Championship following a heartbreaking overtime loss against Czechia. And for more thoughts on this, I was on Game Over International over on SDPN. We did the live stream. The video is up now. You can also get it wherever you are consuming this podcast. But I worry about overreacting to stuff like this because it's an under 20 tournament and like it's happening during the junior hockey season. So there was a lot of people who were saying, you know what they need to do? Blow up the CHL, make a Canadian development team, much like the US does, and let these guys grow so we can have better results at this. It's like, well, I don't know if I'm exploding an entire development system just so we can get awards in a U20 tournament. Like, I get this is a wildly important tournament here in Canada, and TSN has done a great job of making it so. It's a measuring stick, but it's not something you need to go out of your way for to just completely annihilate an entire program and decades of infrastructure in the Canadian Hockey League. But I do think there is something that Hockey Canada needs to do a little bit differently. I've talked before here. I've done play-by-play for a few minor tournaments around Calgary here. And one of the things that has infuriated me is when, like, you can see when you're doing like under 15 tournaments and under 18 tournaments and stuff like that, you can see there's a talent gap on some, right? Like right away, it's like, okay, that dude's a dude and that dude is trying really hard. And you'll see a kid who is so obviously better than who he is going one-on-one with and still dump the puck in and, okay, well, puck's in deep and let's try to grind. And it's like, man, make a move, go to the net and score a flashy goal. Like, I feel like much like a lot of personality has been coached out of players here in Canada, I feel like a lot of high-end talent, I'm not going to say it's been coached out of players because we still have like the Bedards and McDavids and all of them, but I feel like the acceptance of high-end offensive skill and the acceptance of a lot of one-on-one, quite frankly, offensive skill has just gone away. And now it's a lot of, well, you got to do what's right for the team and all those things. And yeah, like you do. But sometimes what's best for the team is, oh, I'm better than that guy, so I'm going to go around him and I am going to score the puck. That seems to be a pretty good thing to do. And so I think Hockey Canada needs to look at how we are actually developing high-end talent, because Canada just didn't have enough in this tournament. They just simply did not. And that like, again, they've won back-to-back. So this isn't a giant referendum and Hockey Canada needs to change and we need a new hockey summit. But I do think that more could be done to kind of modernize things a little bit. They also could have utilized the roster better and selected different players that maybe fit things a little bit more advantageously. But like overall, hockey's caught up. The world has caught up to Canada. We've known this for a while now, right? And so I do think it's up to Canada to kind of adapt with the times a little bit more than they actually have. But it's been a fun tournament so far. It really has. Watching Macklin Celebrini, you can see why people are so hot and bothered to lose a bunch in the National Hockey League. The kid is really, really good. He sees the game so well. He has such a complete offensive game. You get really excited about a player like that. And I came away falling in love with Beck and Danielson. I thought those guys put on a real good show for what they could do as third and fourth line checking forwards and just the tenacity they could bring at the NHL level. Like, you could put Beck on an NHL team tomorrow, and he could play that exact style of hockey for the next, like, 10 years of his life. Like, I was so impressed with him. And now, like, the tournament continues. Canada's done, but the rest of the tournament continues. We will see what the rest of the tournament has in store. That is going to do it for today's episode. One more time, like this video. If you stuck around to the end, you may as well subscribe to the channel. You've stuck around. You kind of like what's going on. So, yeah, do that. I have a lot of different ideas for 2024. You can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/primetimepk. And you can email the show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. Tomorrow is going to be an interesting day. We are going to have the regular podcast tomorrow, NFL Power Rankings. Tomorrow is Wrestle Kingdom Day. So we are going to preview the Japanese version of WrestleMania. I might do those as two separate shows, just so that the wrestling and the regular sports don't commingle quite as much. But we'll see. We'll see how all that goes. And then I am going to do my darndest to watch Wrestle Kingdom live tomorrow night, and then do a instant reaction show once that is done, which will turn into a podcast for Thursday. I am hoping to also have a regular podcast out on Thursday, but obviously the old sleep calendar is going to be a little thrown off with all of that. But then regularly scheduled Friday show coming up with NFL preview, and then it's going to be the best and the worst of MMA, boxing, and professional wrestling for 2023, the final of our year-end shows. So that is what's coming up. For more of me, subscribe to SDPN. Like I said, I was on Game Over International earlier today. I'm going to be on Game Over Calgary as the Flames take on the Minnesota Wild this evening, and I'm going to be on Game Over a few times here over the next little bit as Audie gets a bit of a break. So one more time, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Happy New Year, and I'll talk to all of you a lot over the next little while.